Lisa Fichte, the Director of Continuing Education for the University at Buffalo School of Social Work. I'm here today with Mike Langlois, who is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice and licensed in a variety of states, number of states, I guess not a variety, and also does teaching, consulting work, and specializes in social work and technology. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today, it's kind of a hot issue out there, is selfies and people taking their pictures of themselves with their cell phones and posting it, you know, on social media all over the place. We now see the President of the United States doing selfies. I think the Pope may have also done a selfie. And I'm seeing, you know, blogs and comments from clinicians, you know, taking a clinical assessment of this. And as we work with individuals coming into treatment, you know, if we're seeing selfies all and they're sharing this with us, like, what does selfies mean? Like, what is this all about?
Well, I think, Lisa, one thing is to keep it complicated, that a selfie doesn't necessarily always mean just one thing.
Okay.
But I think, you know, we're having an historic moment. Smartphones are a very recent phenomena. They've only been around for about a decade, and the capacity to take selfies is pretty recent. In fact, this year is the year that selfie became a word in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Oh, wow. So we're really trendy.
So we're really trendy, and this is a new thing. You know, a lot of times people are talking about selfies and the word narcissism creeps up. And I think that it's useful to think about selfies in terms of narcissism if we're thinking about it in the way a psychotherapist named Kohut once thought about narcissism, which was that narcissism is a healthy strand of human development. It's part of what it is to be human, and it's woven in the rest of what we need, that people need food, they need water, and people have emotional needs that have narcissistic qualities. We all need to feel like somebody recognizes us. We need to see ourselves mirrored in our culture. We need to feel like we can be admired by others, or we need to identify people that we can aspire to be like, and that we need to feel a sense of kinship and belonging. That those are all narcissistic needs. And those aren't bad, they're just part of being human. So if selfies are going to meet some of those needs, I say that's a great thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Are there times, I have no idea, when a person's use of selfies could be an indicator of something else going on? I mean, I see selfies increasingly on Facebook and other places of people that I know. Some are lovely and very flattering, and some are oddly unflattering. Mm-hmm. And I think, what made that person choose to take a photo of themselves that is very unflattering? And I think you could line up 12 people who would all agree that that is a really unflattering photo of someone. And is it humor? Is it, I don't know, is there another aspect to when a clinician who might be working with someone and their technology and social work and Facebook, and all of a sudden they're like wondering, is there something more about the selfies that isn't healthy? Mm. I don't know.
I mean, I think I come across as pretty pro-selfie here, and partly because I think at some level that whenever people who take a selfie are acknowledging in that moment that they're worth being visible. And I think there's something powerful to that, that we may not know why they want to be seen a certain way, but in that moment they're saying, I'm visible, that I'm worth being visible. Okay. And I think the other thing about selfies is we're never quite sure of the context. They don't necessarily explain a person. They're a snapshot of a person. Right. And there is context to it that we may not know about. I think if a patient comes in and shows me their Facebook stream and we see a series of selfies, there are things I may want to ask them. Mm-hmm. You know, some questions that I asked them, I've got a little list here to just refresh my memory, were, what were you thinking and feeling the day you took this? Right. What do you hope this says about you? What are you worried this might say about you? What might this selfie tell people about who you are? What might this selfie mislead people into thinking about who you are? To be able to kind of have a value-neutral way of exploring with them, what were they thinking when they posted it, without inherently thinking that it was something bad. You know, I take the stance of it must have been important enough that you wanted to mark that occasion or show us something. What were you trying to show us?
I think that that's really a helpful framework, and that fits with all the other things that you've talked about in the other videos. Asking the questions, you're really looking and then you're listening and saying, well, you know, what were you doing? I almost didn't hire one of the most wonderful people in my life because of just a very misleading photo. It wasn't quite a selfie, but could have been. Right. And so it does create judgments for people. And so that listening and asking questions. I also think, too, selfies are because now we can put photos up of ourselves more easily. We don't have to rely on someone to take our picture, send us the picture by text, email, whatever, and then load it. We can more quickly, as long as our arm is long enough, put up a photo of ourselves and change that. And so that does give some independence to showing our moods, our experiences. And you're right, we might not know that that selfie came from their honeymoon or from a bachelor party or from being very sad. I've been concerned when I see selfies that the person looks incredibly depressed and sad, and that always concerns me.
And the questions then can be, if you're a friend of this person, your picture looks sad. Do you think you are sad? Were you trying to convey that? You know, to respond to it. I think the challenge about photographs is there's always a context, and we often don't know what it is. And one of the best examples I can think of was back when Katrina had happened in Louisiana, and there were two photos that came up and were published by newswires. And one was a white couple wading through water with some stuff, and then a black couple or a black person that was wading through water. And the white couple were foraging for food and trying to survive, and the black man was looting. And the difference was not the picture, but the caption. I think with selfies, we often insert the caption. And I don't think we're always right. I think we need to basically go back and ask the person, if we're disturbed by the selfie, what were you trying to say? But I think photographs don't explain things. I'm with Susan Sontag on that. Yeah. She says photographs don't explain things. They acknowledge a moment. And what about that moment is the person feeling is worth acknowledging? It could be a joyous moment, or it could be a moment of sadness and reaching out. We don't know.
It could be silliness. It could be all kinds of things. We recently saw something, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, why is that person taking a selfie? What happened to their partner?
Right.
All of a sudden there's no pictures that seem to be taken by the person who would be there in that experience. And people didn't even realize till the phone started to develop the technology to reverse it and take a selfie, that now people can do that.
Well, you just raised a really interesting point, which is now that selfies are so easy and predominant, we've begun to interpret the absence of selfies or the absence of people in selfies as meaningful.
Yes.
That we're reading a whole new layer into the photographs we're seeing, which is very different than what photographs used to be.
And I have a friend who always is distressed, why isn't my photo on Facebook anymore? And it's like, well, if you knew how to find it, it's still there, but it's not my profile picture. And so that attaches great meaning because it disrupts the relationship for that person. And so you're right, there's so many layers to photos and what they mean and what the intent was behind them. So I think I think all of this discussion is helpful in giving people some framework to think about selfies because people immediately think selfies selfish.
Well, don't you think this is, I think, a more complicated but hopefully more useful approach than just saying narcissism?
Yeah,
As
absolutely.
if narcissism is bad. Who doesn't want to be visible? You know, you think about how much easier in some ways it is to be an adolescent who is struggling with sexual orientation now, because they see people like them in the world. They exist, therefore I must be able to exist. That meets a narcissistic need. Is that bad? I don't think so. I think it can be remarkably healing. But we have this way that we sometimes use narcissism in a moral sense.
Yes, and very negative. That was the blog post I had recently seen, just that connotation that it's very negative, and you know, and that's what people are kind of thinking, especially when you have generations. The selfie thing is very new. This was very helpful in clarifying, and again, using it as a tool to engage and talk with a person and listen about, well, what were you doing? What was your experience when you took that picture and this picture, and learning more about their life and their feelings.
And can I add one more thing?
Yes, absolutely.
You know, dare I say, not just exploring it, but maybe people want to try taking a selfie. See what it feels like to actually take a selfie. See a picture of yourself, post it, see what people might respond. Think of it as an experiment. That one of the themes we've been exploring in the series is try something.
Absolutely.
So take a selfie.
Because they don't have to show it to anybody. They can simply take a selfie, and for one, you can learn how difficult it is to take a flattering selfie. And you actually use my iPad to do it, because I could prop it up on my knee, because I'm very difficult to photograph, and I know the angles that photograph well and the ones that don't, and I know that people in my family wanted a nice photograph of me. So yeah, it was a selfie with an iPad, but I had then the ability to control it instead of ending up at a photographer with 100 pictures that just didn't look good.
But this brings us back to your person that you said had an unflattering selfie.
Yes.
That may be a selfie of bravery.
It may
be. A selfie of someone that's going to show you their image and not worry about being flattering.
Absolutely. And I didn't know. And that was what the thing I think that struck me was, I just don't know. I care about this person, but I don't know why she did that all of a sudden. Is it an act of bravery and courageousness and saying, hey, I don't care? Or was it trying to send some other message? That I think, as I said, if you got a bunch of us, we would look at it and say, wow, that's not like the usual picture of the selfie. And so what was that all about? But like, how do you even broach that subject? It was harder than saying, gee, you look kind of sad. I didn't even know what to do or what to say. So I wasn't trying to be judgmental, but it definitely stuck out from all of the other kinds of things that I would see from that individual. And so that made me wonder what that was all about. So just very helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you. And now we're going to take selfies of ourselves when we're done.
Should we? We should. Let's take a selfie.
Let's do that off camera.
Okay, we will.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.